All right, we're 2 minutes after the hour. I think it makes sense to get started. My name is Ryan. I lead the offshore wind commercial team within Esgian Offshore Wind. I do see many names that I recognize logging in here, but also a lot of new names. So first and foremost, thank you all for attending today. For those of you that do not know, Esgian, we're headquartered in Oslo, Norway, and we are a market intelligence and data analysis firm for the ocean industries. We operate in three main verticals. That's offshore rigs, shipping, and offshore wind. Our focus today is offshore wind, obviously. As some of you know, each month we host a short webinar that covers a timely and relevant offshore wind topic. We do our best to keep these to the third Thursday of every month at 3 o'clock. And we keep these to 19 minutes, and we do that on purpose. We do understand everyone's time is precious. And we want to pack as much quality information in a short period of time as possible. If you haven't already, I do encourage you to follow SGN Offshore Wind on LinkedIn and sign up for our newsletter to be kept up to date on all future events, news, and our quarterly reports. On our website, as some of you may have noticed, we've recently launched a free interactive offshore wind map. I encourage you to go to www.sgn.com and check out the free interactive offshore wind map. Within SGN Offshore Wind, we offer an award-winning subscription-based digital platform that provides transparency and clarity into the global offshore wind market. Our clients are developers, vessel operators, companies within the supply chain, consultancies, government organizations, and more. And we're primarily helping our clients with business development, competitive analysis, and also strategic planning with data in as close to real time as possible. We update the database on average over 50 times per day. The reason why I mention this is to show that it is data in as close to real time as possible. Today, we have a very fun topic. It's our top 10 offshore wind predictions for 2025. And I want to emphasize that all the information covered today has been analyzed by one of our analysts on the team from the Wind Analytics database. Today, we have Oliver and Kasper joining me. And with that being said, why don't you take it away, Oliver? Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Ryan. So today's webinar follows on from the last webinar we delivered in December 2024, just a month ago. In that webinar a month ago, we ran through our annual look back at how our previous predictions for 2024 had fared. Today is slightly different. We're going to be looking ahead to 2025 and what we think will be we think will be happening in the offshore wind sector. I think we can honestly say that you could argue we sometimes slightly missed the mark in our 2024 predictions, but we definitely still feel confident that time will prove to be kind to us, and many of our predictions from last year will actually come to pass in the next few years. So maybe the timing was out, but thematically we were on track. Anyway, let's nevertheless hope some of this year's top 10 actually do come true during 2025. We will revisit these at the end of this year as well. It's worth stressing, Ryan hinted at this, but we do go through an iterative process among the different analysts in the team who all contribute lots of ideas to this top 10. Worth also stressing, we do try to steer away from more bland predictions, such as offshore wind is going to grow by 13% this year. Instead, we try to look for things that are a bit more dynamic, a bit more interesting, and a bit more thought-provoking. As you can see here on this slide, this is the full list of the top 10 that we released a couple of days ago. As a quick reminder, the full report is always available to any of our subscribers to our products. If you do want a copy, then please do reach out to Ryan and we can make sure that you do receive the full report. We don't really have time to go through all 10 of these top 10 today. There's a bit much content there for just 19 minutes. So instead, Kasper's going to pick up 2 of these, and then I will follow on with another 2 and bring things to a conclusion. So with that introduction finished, let me hand things off to Kasper for him to kick it off with the top 10.
Thank you, Oliver. On to the first of our top 10, where we focus on some of the big picture view. Our first prediction is that populist politics will make for a noisy sideshow. We have over the last couple of years seen more negative sentiments towards offshore wind by politicians running for elections, with some recent examples being in the US, Australia, and South Korea. The language we are seeing more of against offshore wind is used to win over voters with projects affecting their local areas. It is, though, a bit more difficult to pull the plug on projects that are already at an advanced stage, where a company has made large investments and there is a risk that the halt will lead to the loss of local jobs. So, some of the negative claims might be, for the most part, noise. Job creation and energy security remains key aspects for the industry, so it is unlikely that the longer-term dynamics of offshore wind will be highly affected by populist noise. Offshore wind development takes place over a longer period than just one election cycle, so even if plans are quieter and/or delayed in some markets, we will still see progress for the industry. We are with this not saying that there is not uncertainty and delays, like, for example, what we're seeing in the US, but the effects of the noise on longer-term progress might not be that large. On to our fourth prediction, but the second one of the day. Here we are focusing on some trends we're seeing for leasing rounds and awards of new sites. And our prediction here is that we'll see more fine-tuning of lease rounds by host countries. So in the coming year, expect to see more adjustments of leasing processes in order for them to attract top-tier developers and avoid rounds receiving too few bids or getting cancelled. We have in the last year seen a record number of different countries host leasing rounds and offer project areas to developers. But at the same time, we're seeing developers being more selective and holding back on placing bids, focusing on maturing their existing portfolios and securing acceptable profit margins on ongoing projects. It will be up to each individual market to adjust their policy to remain attractive for new ventures. This can both be in the form of the project sites on offer itself and/or the financial support linked to the projects. An example is the Dutch changing their upcoming 2025 rounds, moving away from the planned 2,000 megawatt sites and now offering 1,000 megawatt sites instead. This came after last year's Dutch rounds, where there only came in 2 bids per site, a very low number compared to earlier rounds, and the market feedback was that the larger sites on offer was a bit too risky for the bidders. On the support side, a recent example is in Poland, where they increased the subsidy strike price on their upcoming CFD rounds and adjusting for the site's depth and distance to shore. Likewise, to increase interest in rounds and avoid future projects getting cancelled, Japan has proposed to adjust the awarded subsidy strike price between the lease award and the COD to reflect the potential changes in market conditions experienced during the development phase. The market will also be looking closely at Denmark and their next move after what many called a failed round in December last year, where no bids were placed. The key here will be if they add in new factors to their leasing rounds in order to match the industry expectations and sweeten the deal for potential bidders. And with that, I give the word back to Oliver that will take us through some more predictions.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kasper. I'll move on to number 5, the third one today, but number 5 in the list of top 10. In the last few months, we've been doing quite a lot of work looking at large data sets around power generation from multiple operational wind farms around the world. And this process that we're still ongoing for us has raised lots of interesting questions. And we're helping our clients understand some of the answers to explain diverging results from operational wind farm performance. It's worth noting as well, if you want to find out more information on how you can access those sets of data, then please do reach out to Ryan as well. One of the findings from this work that we felt was interesting was how certain newly operational projects are struggling. and struggling here in terms of accessing grid capacity and therefore maximizing their power generation potential. Grid capacity is without doubt a major concern in many countries. And the view from Scotland in 2024 highlights this issue, and we can see that in this data. And we feel that this will continue to be a factor as we go through 2025. And this is not just in Scotland, but in other geographies as well. So let's take a quick look at the chart here. In the chart, we're showing the capacity factor of 3 offshore wind farms. And this use of the capacity factor allows us to make an apples to apples comparison. What we're looking at is how much of the wind farm's nameplate capacity they're actually able to use. So in short, the closer that you get to 100% on this chart, the better your power generation profile. Now, in theory, all things being equal, we would expect to see these lines track each other quite closely on the right-hand side of the chart once all projects are operational. And the reason they would track each other quite closely, they're geographically close together, and the weather will be the key driver behind the short-term ups and downs, the peaks and troughs that you see. On the data set, you can also see the fairly long and drawn-out startup periods for the green and the purple lines as Moray East and Seagreen went through their commissioning phase and moved through to become fully operational. So having explained it, what are we actually looking at here? Except for Beatrice, the capacity factor of Scottish offshore wind projects has consistently underperformed the peer group in the UK North Sea. So that's other wind farms in northwest and eastern England in 2024. While most projects in these regions had annual capacity factors that were in the high 30s and the low 40s in 2024, Seagreen and Moray East, instead of being in the 30s and 40s, were at 14 and 23% respectively over that full year. The contrast is really stark with Beatrice, which you can see in the blue here. And Beatrice ended at 43% for full year 2024. Power generation from, jumped ahead too soon, the power generation from both Seagreen and Moray East has consistently been curtailed in 2024 due to grid constraints in the transmission network. Given that we can't see any reason for the grid capacity to be significantly unlocked in 2025, we expect these Scottish offshore wind projects to continue running at relatively low rates in the coming year. Now, project owners are likely to continue to be compensated for these curtailments, but without doubt, it remains a suboptimal usage of some of the world's best offshore wind resources. And now finally, let's switch to the last of today's top 10 predictions, and I'll pull back out and go to a more macro perspective here and look at some defense concerns. In November 2024, 13 of Sweden's East Coast Baltic Sea projects were abruptly cancelled by the government, and this was due to defence concerns. Now, we do not think that this will be repeated elsewhere, whether this is in Sweden or in other countries. We feel that this case in Sweden was somewhat unique. Other Baltic countries, and there are plenty of countries, as you can see on the map in the area, that have offshore wind plans, are arguably closer in physical terms to any potential threats, any perceived threats. But their proposed offshore wind farm developments are not in their most geographically exposed areas. Now, there are importantly alternative options for the development of offshore wind in Sweden. Plenty of projects are still proposed in the north and the southwest of the country, and we do not believe that these are likely to be affected by the same defence concerns. It's worth noting as well that we see similar issues around defence concerns playing out with some projects that we're tracking in Asia as well. A good example here is some South Korean projects in the far northwest of the country, which are geographically located relatively close to the maritime border with North Korea. And those projects have clearly been encountering permitting difficulties as defence industries have pushed back quite quickly. Although potentially further from some of the major demand centers in South Korea, there definitely remain numerous alternative opportunities for offshore wind developments that are located elsewhere on the South Korean coast. So even if this doesn't significantly slow down the wider rollout of offshore wind, it definitely feels like defense considerations are going to become more important for developers to be thinking about. Having said that, though, the other side of the coin, it's worth also noting that defense issues have so far had minimal impact on offshore wind developments on both sides of the Taiwan Strait, which is one of the most disputed maritime areas globally. And then to further emphasize and underline this point that we shouldn't overly worry about defense concerns, in early January of this year, just a few days ago, we saw the USA's BOEM agency opening a call area for initial comments in Guam, the site of one of the Pacific Ocean's largest and most strategic naval bases. So you can see in bold here, that was just 4 of the top 10 that we have identified, top 10 predictions that we identified for 2025. And here's a reminder of the full list. And as I did previously mention, please do reach out to Ryan if you would like a copy of the full report. And I'm sure if you do ask nicely, we can also send through some of our top 10 predictions that we've also put out for the last couple of years. We've been doing this for 3 or 4 years now. So with that, let me hand things back to you, Ryan.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Kasper. Thank you, Oliver, for your insights here. And as Oliver mentioned, more than happy to pass along the full report of the top 10 predictions and even the previous years. The key word, as Oliver mentioned, as long as you ask nicely. So we're good there. If you do have Q&A or questions, please type them into the Q&A at the top of the screen. We will get to them, but I want to touch on a few items just beforehand. We have QR codes here for our mailing list. It won't be spam. It's strictly updates on our upcoming events, and you will get the executive version of our quarterly report by signing up for our mailing list. And then also you can see the QR code for our interactive map. Simply just use the QR code with your phone to access. So let's see if we have some questions here.
I can see one, Ryan, around the defense concerns. Maybe if I pick that up and see if Kasper, there's anything you want to add. And the question,
but real quick, Oliver, let me just read it out so everyone knows the question. So the question that came through is, what kind of defense concerns are those in Sweden? Russia's threat? Question mark.
Yeah, I think the answer is as far as I can remember, and Kasper, you may have to help me on this one, but I was not aware that the Swedish government explicitly said what the defense threat was, but I think that's the implicit answer to the question, that it is believed to come from Russia. And that really explains the comment we made around the east coast of Sweden being somewhat more exposed, because that's geographically a bit closer to that threat than some of the other areas in Sweden that would be a little bit further away. So it wasn't explicit, but it was implicit in those cancellations.
Yep, excellent. We've got a couple more coming through. Britt asked one, and this is a question that we were actually anticipating, I think, and I was going to probably ask it if this did not come through. So can you say a bit more about the wind market outlook for the U.S., specifically Trump?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it on the first of the top 10 around, we feel it's noisy. I think it's worth stressing that comment was partly on the US, but not strictly on the US alone. I think, as Kasper mentioned, we're seeing this in other countries as well, other jurisdictions too. So it's not purely a US phenomenon that we were looking at there. We discussed this a lot in the team, actually, amongst the analysts about whether to include it. And the reason we discussed that is because we find it quite hard, to be honest, at the moment. We find it quite difficult to take a strong view on what will happen in the US in the future. And the key word here, as we've been saying for a while, is uncertainty. We really don't know what this means. We have from our discussions in the industry with our contacts, a view on that things are clearly slowing down, but that feels like it's a wait and see at the moment. I think the key thing that we would also highlight is that the election cycle is 4 years. Offshore wind is not a 4-year cycle for anything at all. And even if things stop at the government level for 3 or 4 years, there's still a lot of internal work that can be done within companies to get projects ready, assuming that there is a change in 4 years' time, which may not happen, who knows. So the US for us, very uncertain, to say the least. I think we don't think everything will come to a grinding halt, but we may be very wrong on that. Our current view on all our forecasts is that if you're under construction now, you may have a short moratorium, and short, we can leave that definition, but we think they will carry on. If you are not yet under construction, you may have a long wait ahead of you.
Excellent. Thanks, Albert. We've got another question that came through. Do you know the main reasons for the low performance of the Scottish wind farms?
A lot of it's grid capacity and lack of grid capacity. So they're being curtailed by the TSO.
Excellent. I think that's all the questions that we have right now. We did finish the webinar in 19 minutes with an additional few minutes for questions. So we were right on time. Actually, we got one more here, another question that came through, and I think we have time to answer this real quickly. What is your view of the supply chain capacities across key components?
I guess my first reaction is that's a big question. It's different across every component. That may not help when we can go into those details offline to a certain extent. I guess it's not such a huge issue for us that we're that worried about it in most markets at the moment. I think we feel that things are keeping up. That doesn't mean that there's not constant pressure to keep expanding those capacities, but at the moment we feel like it's not too bad. But there is that constant pressure to keep pushing it out. But I think it's probably worth there's like several hours worth of discussion we can have if we can take each component one by one and run through them and maybe take that offline with that particular question.
Yep, I can coordinate with Christian there if you would like to take that offline. We have another one that's we have a few just keep coming through here. What perspectives do you have regarding floating offshore?
I guess me again. Kasper, feel free to jump in if you want. People are going to get a bit bored of my voice. Floating, slow and steady. I guess we're more positive than we were 12, 18 months ago. We're starting to see some movement, but is this sort of forever going to be tomorrow for floating? But there we sort of see some commercial stuff coming through now, clearly getting subsidy support in Korea is a big step there. Getting the French projects done is helpful. So definitely movement now to get into that commercial scale thing. Actually building them on a commercial scale will be the sort of next thing that we sit there worrying about, but at least we're finally getting them through the system. But it's a slow old process. I guess the other question we always get is on which is actually in our top 10, is on the floating technologies. The comment that we have in the top 10 around that this year was that we think we may finally see, as projects move into that commercial acceptance, that we will start to get the winners really finally. And I do stress the finally coming through on that, because it has been a slow process and there's still way over 130, 140 different technologies that we're tracking. But there are now, it really seems to be breaking into those that are much more widely accepted and those that are just going to fall by the wayside. So I think that's one of the top 10 we had in 25.
Yep. Very good. Well, I hope everyone found today's discussion beneficial. As I mentioned in the beginning, we do host a webinar, keep them to 19 minutes, the third Thursday of every month at 3 o'clock. We do our best effort to be consistent there. if you sign up for the mailing list with that QR code, you will be notified of the upcoming webinars. So I do highly encourage you sign up for that. So with that being said, thank you to Oliver, thank you to Kasper, and hope to see you next month. Have a great one, everyone.
Thanks very much. Bye.